ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Hi, it's Patricia Carvelis here from the Party Room podcast. And as the 2025 election looms, and it looms large, we're joined on the podcast by election king, national treasure, general excellent guy, Anthony Green, to take a look at what seats are in play. Where should you be looking? What are the states? Where are the electoral distributions that will change the race? Listen to the episode on the ABC Listen app.
Incoming US President Donald Trump has taken credit for it, and his impending inauguration did give the negotiations a boost. After months of talks, a deal has been done for a ceasefire in Gaza. It's set to start on the weekend, with the first phase to include the release of some Israeli hostages. Today, Hussein Ibish from the Arab Gulf States Institute on whether peace will hold. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily.
At long last, I can announce a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas. Fighting in Gaza will stop, and soon the hostages will return home to their families.
The state of Qatar stresses the necessity of the two parties' full commitment to implementing the agreement in its three stages as a means to prevent the bloodshed of civilians, spare the region the consequences of this conflict, and pave the way for achieving a just and sustainable peace.
There have been celebrations on the streets of Gaza. Crowds are also gathering in Tel Aviv as they await the full day.
It's very, very late. It's supposed to be a year ago.
We want to rebuild because we're exhausted. We're tired with our imprisoned children, with our injured children. We're tired, truly. We can't take it anymore. Our hearts are heavy with pain.
Hussein, the war in Gaza has been underway for 15 months, so the relief that this deal has been done is really palpable on both sides, isn't it?
Yeah, it's enormous, absolutely. I mean, I think the Israelis are overjoyed at the idea of getting some hostages back, and the Palestinian people are desperate for a break from the killing and for humanitarian aid, food and medicine, which has been in achingly short supply, and also the ability perhaps to start going back to their homes or what's left of them, and seeing what kind of rebuilding is needed,
A version of this deal has been on the table since May. So why now? Donald Trump, of course, is taking some credit. Tell me about that.
Well, it was actually on the table even earlier than that. I mean, this is almost exactly the deal that was on the table since May. But before that, it was on the table since January. And even the first inklings of it go back to November of 23. So the ideas have been around for a long time. The Trump effect is very important because Trump placed enormous pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu to make a deal before his inauguration. And Netanyahu has much riding on support for Trump. Also, Netanyahu's under a lot of pressure from the Israeli public and from the Israeli military, which is still bleeding forces in Gaza. They lost 10 soldiers in Bet Hanun in northern Gaza last week to the Hamas insurgency, which is now running on a shoestring, but it's effective. On the other hand, the other big tipping point was the downfall of Assad in Syria, which really swung the pendulum in Hamas away from the gunmen in Gaza who are aligned with Iran back to the politicians in the Politburo of Hamas who are aligned with Turkey and Qatar.
Well, let's just unpack this deal a bit more then. It comes into force, of course, on Sunday, and there are a number of phases. What happens in the first phase?
Well, in the first phase, there'll be 33 Israeli prisoners and a number of unspecified, but hundreds of Palestinians, many of them women and younger people, but also some Hamas cadres. It's not clear exactly who yet. We know who not. Israel will withdraw from most of the Gaza Strip behind an expanded northern buffer zone. And they will also withdraw from the Netzarim corridor they created, which bifurcates Gaza in half, running from east to west, and also from the Philadelphia corridor, which is this strip of land that runs across the border with Egypt. There, Israel will retain a small outpost, but it will withdraw from most of that as well. And it does not appear that Israel will be able to really control the ability of Palestinians to go back to their homes in the northern third of Gaza. Although they had tried to create a vetting system, but it doesn't look like that's going to be part of this.
Okay, so that's the first phase. Then what comes in the second phase? This is when a permanent ceasefire comes into place.
That's right. The second phase would involve a permanent ceasefire and the release of all remaining hostages in exchange for another round of Palestinian prisoners, the finalization of whatever expanded Israeli buffer zone will be made semi-permanent, and the fate of the outposts in the Philadelphia corridor will be determined. And that will then set the stage for phase 3, which, according to the original Biden sort of vision, which all of this is following, that would then lay the groundwork for the creation of a new Palestinian civic authority aligned with the Palestinian Authority and the PLO in the West Bank to take over the administration of Gaza from both Israel and Hamas. I must say, Israel has been saying in a semi-public way that it's only committing to phase 1. And that is a very important caveat. We don't hear any official Israeli commitment to phase 2 or phase 3 at this point.
Right, so incredibly complicated moving forward still.
Indeed.
And also, we don't know, do we, how many hostages are actually alive?
No.
We don't know what the figure is.
No, we don't. There is some sense. So, for example, of the 33 that would be released beginning on Sunday, it is assumed that 25 to 26 of them are alive, and the rest, unfortunately, are not alive. Some of them may have died in the October 7 attack itself, and the bodies transported into the Gaza Strip, or they perished either in Israeli air raids or possibly even at the hands of hostage takers, although that doesn't make a lot of sense. It may have happened.
And the deal has to pass the Israeli parliament, and not everyone in the Israeli government agrees with this deal, do they?
No, that's right. Well, there's been a lot of opposition from the far right, the followers of Meir Kahane, the late ultra-radical rabbi. His followers include Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich and National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. So those two are going to vote against the agreement in the cabinet and then in the Knesset, and then they're going to ask the Supreme Court to block it, and in the end it's going to happen. And they will stay in the government, and that's what's very likely.
Well, Hussein, let's look now at where the war was actually up to until this point. When Israel began its war in Gaza after that terrible attack on its soil by Hamas,
right,
what was its objective? The total dismantling of Hamas, wasn't it?
Well, that's what they said, but it was a quixotic goal. It's not possible to destroy Hamas because Hamas is a concept. As long as there's a group of Palestinians calling themselves Hamas, there's Hamas. Then they changed the goal to being the dismantling of Hamas as a governing structure. Now, that has been accomplished, but they've done something very strange, which is they've absolutely refused to discuss any alternative to Hamas as a governing structure. And at the same time, obviously, the Israeli military doesn't want to take that up itself and become the governing structure in Gaza. So what we're getting now is an Israeli strategic decision to leave Gaza in the hands of Hamas. That is absolutely what they are doing, and they are doing it deliberately. They have refused to discuss anything else, and now they're leaving, as they were always going to, and they're leaving it to Hamas. And this is not unintentional. It's fully intentional. The Israeli government, has always cherished splitting the Palestinian movement between Hamas rule in Gaza and Fatah rule in the West Bank. And they obviously want to continue that despite October 7th. So all that stuff about getting rid of Hamas permanently appears to be the utmost of humbug.
And the death toll in Gaza, I mean, this has turned out to be a long war. The death toll is very hard to fathom, isn't it?
It's staggering.
Do we really know what it is? What is the number?
No, we don't. The health authorities in Gaza, who actually, even though they're Hamas-run, miraculously have a very good track record, they counted it at over 46,000, mostly civilians. Obviously, that doesn't include people buried under the rubble, and also people who perished and either been buried at home or buried by their relatives or simply lying around somewhere, because the official count is only tallied in morgues and hospitals. So there's a much bigger number out there. And one of the benefits of a long-term ceasefire would be the ability of international experts to go in and give us a really detailed, thoroughgoing, impartial calculation of the death toll among Palestinians.
All right. Well, Hussein, as we mentioned, this is going to be incredibly complicated going forward. You did refer to how Gaza might be governed. That in itself will be difficult, won't it? Will a governing body, whatever's set up, have legitimacy in the eyes of Palestinians? How complicated will that be?
Yeah, very, very complicated. I mean, look, the way it's being left, no one will be on the ground to be able to stop the remnants of Hamas from reasserting their control through force, which is what they've always done. And it's very hard to imagine a scenario in which the Israelis agree to allow the Palestinian Authority or some other civic group supposedly not connected to them, but in reality kind of connected to them and overseen by international support and regional support, takes over. This is a scenario that Israel has resisted at every stage. Netanyahu has refused to even discuss it. He keeps saying this is a matter for the military, it's too soon to bring it up, and hey presto, now it's over. And, but that leaves Hamas in charge. Now that, as I say, goes back to his original policy of making sure the Palestinian movement is split. And apparently that remains his priority, no matter what he actually says. Now, it's very hard to interpret it any other way, honestly.
And also, of course, he's saying rebuilding. I mean, what a job. I mean, how are they going to rebuild Gaza? It's destroyed.
Well, yeah, Gaza is destroyed. Over 80% of standing structures are damaged or destroyed. You can rebuild it, but it's going to take time and it's going to take material and building equipment and things like that. And Israel is going to have to allow that stuff to be imported. And again, that seems to be a long way off. Really require a great deal of pressure on the Israelis to get them to do that. And I don't see that happening anytime in the immediate future.
Well, Hussein, of course, this is a huge step towards peace.
Definitely.
But I guess with all ceasefires, it's a matter of whether it will hold.
That is correct. Exactly. And, either side could decide to start the war again at any time. Probably neither will do it in the 42 days of phase one. But even though Hamas, at least the political leaders, would want to get into phase two and go forward with this, I think the Israeli side is not at all convinced about that. And the gunmen on the ground of Hamas may not be convinced about it either. So there are quite a few potential major actors who may decide 42 days is quite enough, let's get back to the killing. And that's a very plausible scenario, I'm afraid.
Hussein Ibish is from the Arab Gulf States Institute. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed and Cara Jensen-McKinnon. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. ABC News Daily will be back again on Monday. Thanks for listening.